as summer temperatures dropped and summer crops struggled, many people became very worried. And as unseasonal storms rolled in, people turned to God and superstition in fear of what was happening around them. The year was 1816. It was a leap year, starting on a Monday of the Gregorian calendar. And it was the 816th year of the second millennium. But at the start of this 1816, there was a dire event that would happen that would ultimately change its nickname forever. The year was known as the Year Without a Summer. It was 1816, and because of the low temperatures in the northern hemisphere, the result of a volcanic eruption, it caused global cooling and catastrophic changes in some locations. I'm Shieldbro6, and today we are talking about 1816, the Year Without a Summer. We're going to discuss the volcanic eruption, the effects it had, and the dire consequences and terrifying events that unfurled. The year was 1816, and it was known as the Year Without a Summer for a good reason. As stated in the State of the Union by James Madison, it said, "Our attention cannot be withheld from the effect produced by peculiar seasons, which have very generally impaired the annual gifts of the earth, and threaten scarcity in particular districts." James Madison, 1816. So as we continue on, you can see here with the map the anomalies of the temperatures, and that's in Celsius. And -3 and -2 Celsius is a very large change. We saw decreases in up to 2 degrees Fahrenheit overall, and anywhere from 0.4 Celsius to 2 whole Celsius to 3 whole Celsius temperature difference in 1816. Summer temperatures in Europe were the coldest on record between the years of 1766 to 2000, 1816 being the winter. This resulted in major food shortages across the northern hemisphere. So as you can see here with the change of the jet streams, with the blue representing the summer of 1816 and the red being a typical summer jet stream pattern for the time period, and evidence suggests that the anomaly was predominantly caused by a volcanic winter event caused by the massive 1815 eruption of Mount Tambora in April of the Dutch East Indies at the time, now known as Indonesia, and this eruption was the largest in at least 1200 years at the time. And after they hypothesized that the eruption caused the volcanic winter of 536 as well. And it was perhaps exacerbated by the 1814 eruption of Mayon in the Philippines. So these two, or possibly just one, volcanic eruptions shot so much soot and ash and volcanic rock into the atmosphere that it changed the jet stream patterns for that time, as you can see with the map. The Year Without a Summer was an agricultural disaster, as historian John D. Post had called it this, quote, "the last great subsistence crisis of the Western world due to the food loss." The climatic aberrations of 1816 had their greatest effect on most of New England, Atlantic Canada, and parts of Western Europe, as you saw with that map, with -3 change in France and the like. So we saw terrifying changes that you can see here on the coast in this painting, and agriculturally it was just completely disastrous. People were blaming whoever they could find as a scapegoat. Some people blamed even people such as Ben Franklin for his experiments with electricity. They blamed him for that. Or they blamed it on the American Revolution against the King and the French Revolution. They said that perhaps the kings had been ruling by divine right, and when they had upset God by overthrowing these monarchs. And these hypotheses, it got out of hand quite quickly. But it's understandable when you have to understand, in an agricultural lifestyle, such a dire change in the middle of what should be your biggest growing seasons is just going to be detrimental to your psyche and your overall health, as just everything is changing around you rapidly, the reverse of what it should be. So as a result of the series of volcanic eruptions I mentioned, crops had been poor for several years at this point. The final blow came in 1815 with the eruption of Tambora, which made the already poor crops in Europe even worse. Europe at this time was still recuperating from the Napoleonic Wars, and they were suffering from regular food shortages anyway. So the impoverished especially suffered during this time. Low temperatures and heavy rains resulted in failed harvests in Great Britain, Ireland, Wales, and France. Families in Wales traveled long distance begging for food, pulling what few belongings they had with them as they begged for access to food, as you can see here depicted. Famine was prevalent throughout Great Britain and as far as North and Southwest Ireland, following the failure of wheat, oat, and potato harvests. In Germany even, the crisis was so severe that food prices rose sharply throughout Europe because of the demand for German goods. With the cause of the problems unknown at the time, hungry people demonstrated in front of grain markets and bakeries. So they would go picket these bakeries and grain makers trying to get access. They thought, it was some scheme against them. So they would go picket and protest the bakers, the millers, all that. And really, they had no choice in the matter, because even if the bakers wanted to fix something, they couldn't, because they did not have access either. Later, there was even riots, arson, and looting taking place in major European cities. On some occasions, rioters carried flags reading "bread or blood" throughout the city limits. The riots were common during the times of hunger in this time period. The food riots of 1816 and 1817 were the highest levels of violence since the French Revolution, which was about, 20 years at this point. It was the most and worst famine of the 19th century mainland Europe had seen. Between 1816 and 1819, major typhus epidemics occurred in parts of Europe, including Ireland, Italy, Switzerland, and Scotland, precipitated by the malnourishment and famine caused by the year without a summer's bad harvest. More than 65,000 people died as the disease spread out of Ireland and onwards throughout Britain. The long-running Central England temperature record reported that the 11th coldest year on records since 1658, as well as the third coldest overall summer and coldest July on record, were held by 1816. Huge storms and abnormal rainfall, with flooding of Europe's major rivers, including the Rhine, are attributed to the event, as is the August frost. As a result of volcanic ash in the atmosphere, Hungary experienced brown snow. Italy's northern and north-central region experienced something similar, with red snow falling throughout the year. There was even August snow. The effects were widespread and lasted beyond the winter. In western Switzerland, the summers of 1816 and 1817 were so cold that an ice dam formed between a tongue of the Gietro Glacier high in the Val des Bands and another tongue. And despite engineer Ignaz Venet's efforts to drain the growing lake, the ice dam collapsed catastrophically in 1818, killing over 40 people. So it was so cold throughout the year and summer that an ice dam was able to form in Switzerland. In the spring and summer of 1816, a persistent dry fog was observed in parts of the eastern United States, as depicted here. The fog reddened and dimmed the sunlight, such that sunspots were visible to the naked eye. Neither wind nor rainfall could disperse the, quote, fog. It has been characterized as a stratospheric sulfate aerosol veil. So essentially, it was a veil made up of like sulfate aerosols by that volcano eruption that just blocked out the sun. The weather was not in itself a hardship for those accustomed to long winters, but the problem is the hardship came from the weather's effects on crops and thus on the supply of food and firewood. Whereas these pioneers and settlers in America might be used to, tough winters, they aren't prepared for that year round. They usually have the summer to prepare, get firewood, get food, all that stuff. But this time they did not have that. They had a year of the harsh conditions. In May of 1816, frost killed off most crops in the higher elevations of Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Vermont, and upstate New York. On June 6, snow fell in Albany, New York. June 6, it's snowing in Albany, New York, as well as Dennisville, Maine. In the Cape, Maine, and New Jersey, frost was reported 5 nights in a row in late June. What should be almost the hottest time of the year, there was frost and snow. and it caused extensive crop damage and property damage. New England has also experienced major consequences from the eruption of Tambora during this time. Though fruits and vegetable crops survived, corn and wheat was reported to have ripened so poorly that no more than a quarter of the crop was usable for food. Think about that. The mainstead was bread at the time. So corn, wheat, both of those are very necessary for making breads and carbs like that. And suddenly, 3/5 of your crop is gone. It just fails. The crop failures in New England, Canada, and parts of Europe also caused the prices of many staples to rise sharply. In Canada, Quebec ran out of bread and milk, and Nova Scotians found themselves boiling foraged herbs to stay alive. They had to boil roots to stay alive in June. Many commented on the phenomenon. We have Sarah Snell Bryant of Cummington, Massachusetts, who wrote in her diary, quote, "Weather is backwards," end quote. We also see other quotes as people are on hills in May that are, quote, "barren like winter," as a family of Shakers in New Lebanon, New York stated. That, quote, "all was frozen at the end of May 1816. They had to replant crops destroyed by the cold in June. And on July 7th, it was so cold that everything had stopped growing. In July! And then we see frost again in August. On August 23rd, we see frost in the Berkshire Hills of Massachusetts, and even more up northeast. It's just unbelievable to imagine nowadays that in July and August, you would be seeing, frost and snow, which, that's out of the ordinary for summer anyways. But, especially nowadays, that's just insane to think of, especially the effects it would have. It's no wonder that an agricultural-based society would react so harshly and be so confused in the past about this event. Summer suddenly disappearing, or so it seemed. And now in the middle of July, we had not had what could properly be called summer. Easterly winds had prevailed for nearly 3 months past. The sun during this time has generally been obscured, and the sky overcast with clouds. The air is damp and uncomfortable, and frequently so chilling as to render the fireside a desirable and necessary retreat. End quote. And that's from a Norfolk, Virginia newspaper in the beginning of September in 1816. We also see the prices of corn and other grains rise dramatically. The price of oats, for example, rose from 12 cents per bushel to 92 cents a bushel in 1816. That goes up 80 cents, which today is about a $11 increase in prices because of the just sheer scarcity that they were encountering. Similarly to Hungary and Italy, Maryland experienced brown, bluish, and yellow snowfall during April and May as well due to the volcanic ash. High levels of tephra in the atmosphere caused a haze to hang over the sky. As you can see depicted here, top left, as you can see that haze that they have painted there. Paintings during the years before and after confirm that these streaking and striking reds and browns were not present before St. Tambora's eruption and stopped a few years after. And there's several especially that are considered snapshots of the change in mood, as with Caspar David Friedrich's pieces The Monk by the Sea, which I showed you earlier, The Two Men by the Sea in 1817, and this one, which are all clear examples of the shifting mood. And we just, nowadays, especially in 2007, we saw a study analyzing paintings that really time framed this for us, as we saw the rise in these hues and shades and clouds, and then they stopped again a few years after. The events, especially in the Northwest Territory and in New England, were terrible, as they were felt all over American heartland. And there was even a poem that was written, and the imagery in the poem is starkly similar to the conditions of The Year Without a Similar, as this poem was made by Lord Byron, and its quote, and its title is Darkness. Quote, "I had a dream, which was not all a dream. The bright sun was distinguished, and the stars did wander darkling in the internal space. Rayless and pathless in the icy earth swung blind and blackening in the moonless air. Morn came and went, and came and brought no day. End quote. One benefit that came out of this, however, is Justus von Lieberg, a chemist who was experiencing the famine at the time as a child in Darmstadt, later went on to study plant nutrition and introduced mineral fertilizers to help prevent this from happening on such a sheer scale ever again. So, that brings us to the end today. I hope you enjoyed the year 1816, the year without a summer. I hope you learned something, and I hope, this isn't really talked about, this is obscure, so I hope this is a new subject for you, perhaps eye-opening to such events that have happened before in nature and history. But I hope you enjoyed. If you did, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button for me. It's the way to help me get my content out there, and I really appreciate it. If you ever have a comment, suggestion, concern, or if I got something wrong, just let me know in the comment section down below for me. I do read all of your comments. If you want to support me further, check out the links in the description of the video. But for now, this is all from Shield Bro 6 for the History Armada. Thank you for watching.